John, Tim was telling me that you've had a UFO experience. Can you give us a little insight into how that
Oh
happened? And
Lord, let me tell you, I've had a couple of them that are just totally mind blowing. The first one, it's a little bit long if you don't mind the length of it, but it's relevant the way it comes about because there was also a paranormal component to it. And this was when I was, I guess, in my late teens, around 20, somewhere around in there. And I had been reading professionally since I was 18. I had had by then a plethora of physical paranormal manifestations. I did not believe in UFOs. I had seen the interviews. I'd read the stories, read the books, read the magazines. Nope, 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 nope. Hate buying it. Don't believe it. So I was coming out of this building one day, and this is back in West Texas where I grew up. And this blast of wind, this gust of wind hits me in the face as soon as I come out. And I look up and it's overcast and the clouds are low and dark. And I'm, oh boy, here we go. We're in for one of our thunderstorms, maybe even a tornado. You know, we're in the tip end of Tornado Alley, and West Texas weather is incredibly violent. You know, baseball, softball size hail, you know, all kinds of damaging winds, even when there's not a tornado, so on and so forth. So my car is parked across this narrow 2-lane street in this parking lot over here. I can see the car from where I'm standing. I'm like, boy, I better run from my car before it hits. And what stops me from running for my car is there is this column, this cloud that's in a column coming down attached to the clouds above that's sitting in the parking lot by my car, touching the bottom of touching the pavement, touching the parking lot. And it's about 3, 4, 5 feet in diameter. And I'm looking at this thing. I'm like, okay, it's not a tornado because we'd all be going to hell by now. And it's not a dust devil. What is this? And as I'm watching it, and it's churning and it's rotating and it's boiling and roiling, but I noticed something really, really strange. There's debris in the parking lot, like paper cups that are squished flat and pieces of paper and this, that, and the other that are around the base of the cloud. So with it rotating, all this wind, everything else, all this should be blowing around or circulating around this cloud, and all the debris is perfectly still around the cloud. So this makes no sense. So I'm like, okay, my first thought I have is because I'm seeing this way, and I'm being totally serious. I said, okay, at the tender young age of 20, whatever I was, I've had a stroke, and I'm hallucinating. I've gone nuts. This is it. When all this passes over, I'm going to get my car. I'm going to go to the hospital. I'm going to say, hey, man, I'm having these problems. And then the compound things, there's these glowing orbs about the size of a volleyball that all up and down the length of this cloud start emerging and then receding back in. And they're phosphorescent glowing colors. They're red and yellow and orange and green and purple. I'm like, okay, I have lost the plot. I have lost the farm. And then I get this overwhelming, bizarre urge to walk toward the cloud. I'm like, well, I'm nuts. Why not? I'll just be crazy. Sure, why not?
Let's go. You and I are very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I walk toward the cloud, and the cloud advances in the parking lot towards me. I stop, and it stops. I back up, and it backs up. I said, okay. So I walk toward the cloud again. And it walks toward me, and I back up, and it backs up. So I'm standing there pondering that, and I'm up by the door of the building, and the door opens, whacks me in the back, and this buddy of mine comes out, and he goes, oh, man, I'm sorry. What are you doing standing there so close to the door? And before I can even answer, he looks up the sky, and he goes, oh, boy, looks like we're in for it, huh? And then he looks over in the parking lot, and he goes, what in the world is that? And my first reaction is, thank God I'm not nuts. He sees it, too. I'm not crazy. So I tell him, yeah, but watch this. And I walk toward the cloud. It moves toward me. I stop and it stops. I back up, it backs up. Do that a few times. I look at him. I say, isn't that the craziest thing you've ever seen? He looks at me like I'm the craziest thing he's ever seen. He's like, bye. He's out of there. He's freaked out. His car's parked the opposite way. So he runs the opposite direction, leaves me alone with this thing. And I'm like, oh my God, what do I do now? So all of a sudden it rises back up into the clouds above. I'm like, and the clouds start to move over. And I'm like, okay. So I run for my car. I get in, light me a cigarette, turn on the radio. Like, what in the world was that? So I pull out, start to drive. And I have to tell you, I know this town literally like the back of my hand, still do today. So I know where every block is, every street is, every store is. And we had a Sears store downtown at the time. And I had the best sporting goods department on the entire planet. Man, I used to love to go down there.
At Sears.
Yeah, best sporting goods. Ted Williams fishing rods. Oh, my God. So it was on Beauregard Street. And when I pull out, it begins to rain. Now, this is not an everything's bigger in Texas story. And I mean, it rains bad in Texas. If you've ever lived in Texas for a while, in 20 minutes, it can rain hard enough to flood underpasses, flood your lawn, everything else. But this rain starts coming down, and it's unlike anything I've ever experienced there growing up in West Texas. It is raining so hard that I've got my windshield wipers on high, I've got my lights on, and I cannot see beyond a foot past the hood of my car. That's the only visibility I've got. I look out my side window to where I know there are cars parallel parked on the street. I can't see them. So I'm poking along like that, and I'm getting panicky. I'm like, God almighty, I'm going to hit somebody. Somebody's going to hit me. I'm going to scrape one of these parked cars. What the heck do I do? And the wipers are on high, beating at this thing, and it's useless. So there's like a waterfall running down my car windshield. And like I said, I've got my lights on, and I can see about a foot past the hood of my car. That's it.
Scary.
And I'm poking along, and I'm counting the streets as I go, because you can see this little bitty teeny tiny pinpoint of light, and it's like, what is that little? Oh my God, that's a stoplight, and it looks like a little pinprick of light up there. And so I've counted the streets, and I know where I'm at. I see the stoplight, and I almost run into this car that's in front of me. The car behind me almost hits me because you can't see. There's no visibility. And I'm like, okay, I've hit Twig Street. So the Sears had a parking lot in the back where there's an automotive center, and they had a big parking lot. I said, if I can inch my way into that parking lot, I'm going to get out. Don't care how soaked I get. I'll run in, look at the sporting goods till the storm passes. Yeah, I can't keep driving like this. I'm going to wreck. So I turn the corner, and I'm poking on the bumper of this guy in front of me. The car behind me is trying to keep from hitting me. And I'm still so worried I'm going to scrape these cars. And so I'm holding onto the steering wheel, and I lean over as far as I can. I had a bench seat, and I lean over as far as I can to look out my passenger window, trying to see where these cars are angle parked. And as I'm leaned over like that, the rain stops instantly. Doesn't slack off. Doesn't go down to a drizzle or a mist. It stops instantly. It's gone. There's no moisture in the air. I mean, 1 second you have zero visibility. The next second I can see down the street, see behind me, see all around me. Still overcast, but it's perfectly clear. And there's not a mist hitting my windshield. I'm like, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. So I reach up, turn my windshield wipers off. And all of a sudden in the opposite lane, coming in our direction, the cars start honking and swerving into our lane, almost hitting the cars that are in our lane. And I'm like, what in God's name is going on? And people are jumping out of their cars, pointing up the sky. People are rolling down their windows and pointing up the sky. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, the reason that the rain is instantly stopped, and the reason they're jumping out pointing at the sky, there's an F5 tornado that's coming down, and I'm too damn young to die, damn it. And I look up at the sky where everybody's pointing, and we're at almost at the entrance of the Sears parking lot. Well, then you can see the Sears building at the rear of it. And right up over the top of the Sears building is this shiny metallic UFO sitting there hovering over the Sears building, about maybe 30 feet off the top of the roof. It's about 30 to 50 feet in diameter, shiny, gleaming, no sound, no smoke, no flames, no nothing, just sitting there hovering over the Sears building. And I literally did a cartoon eye rub because I don't believe in UFOs. I'm hallucinating. And I look up, and there it is. And I'm like, so that's why all the people were nearly running into us and were honking and yelling and jumping out. They saw this thing before I did. So I see this thing in the presence of all these witnesses, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 people or more in broad daylight. So now I have to switch denominations. I got to switch religions because they're the damn thing is. Okay. So I reach for my door handle. I'm going to get out and get a better look. And when I reach for my door handle, the UFO just barely perceptibly moves toward us. And the clouds rush from behind, cover it over, and the rain is instantly back, just like it was before, instantly. And I'm like, holy cow. So We're creeping along again, like 5 miles an hour or less. And the guy in front of me turns into the Sears parking lot. I said, I don't care if I hit this guy. My insurance will cover it. I'm going to corner this guy. I still can't believe my eyes. So I park right next to him, nearly scrape his car. I see his dome light come on. He jumps and runs for the Sears building. I jump out. The rain's coming down so hard it hurts. I mean, it's like just pelting. So I run in. He stopped. There's a vestibule in the Sears store before you go into the main doors and go into the store proper. And off to the left is the basement. And in the vestibule, there's a big mat where you wipe your feet and everything. So he's standing there on that mat, just staring down. And I remember he wore glasses. I didn't at the time. And his glasses were beaded with water. And we both looked like we'd just come out of the shower. So I walked around in front of him. It took him a little bit to realize I was there. And he looked up and he looked at me. And I said, excuse me, but did you see what I just saw? And he stared at me for a little bit. And he said, yeah, but I damn sure ain't going to tell nobody. And he sidestepped me and walked off through the store. And you got to remember, this is back during the time that if you told anybody that you believed in ghosts or believed in UFOs or this, that, and the other, you were ridiculed. You were scorned. You could lose your job, all these types of things. So that was the atmosphere. But that was my first UFO encounter. And
Did that make it in the news or anything?
No, it didn't. No. Well, there was a buddy of mine that wrote for our local newspaper. We'd gone to school together, and I told him about that. And I think he wrote a little piece and might have put it in the paper down the road. But there was no official news coverage or anything.
Gotcha.
And like I said, people didn't talk about that.
Right.
Nobody was going to call up the paper and say, "Hey, guess what I just saw?" Yeah. Go back to bed. So,
still, though, that explains so much potentially about the UFO phenomenon, John. I used to do a little storm chasing in Mississippi, which, as you know, has a lot of tornadic activity.
Yes.
But you don't actually see a lot of tornadoes because, one, Northeast Mississippi, where Smitty and I grew up, is very hilly.
Yeah.
2, the tornadoes tend to happen at night. And 3, they tend to be soaked in heavy rain and such. And now my mind is racing thinking, wow, what a perfect way for UFOs and UAP
to disguise themselves,
to move about completely unknown.
Exactly right.